What if you knew? It's a question humanity has whispered in the dark for millennia. What if you knew, not just that you would die, but how and when? Would that knowledge be a gift, a chance to make peace and say goodbye? Or would it be the ultimate curse, a terrifying, unchangeable appointment with fate, forcing you to walk toward your own end, aware of every single step? The rational mind dismisses this as fantasy. We believe time is a straight line, that the future is an unwritten page. But throughout history, there have been stories, accounts from credible people, presidents, soldiers, children, and ordinary men and women who claim to have seen a glimpse of that final unwritten page. A dream, a vision, a sudden intrusive thought, so clear and so specific, it could only be a memory of something that had not yet happened. Tonight, we are not exploring hauntings or monsters. We are exploring 3 chillingly credible, true accounts of the ultimate paranormal experience. People who saw a preview of their own death.
Like and subscribe. We start with the first story.
Our first story comes from one of the most respected and documented figures in history. A man whose life was defined by logic, reason, and the immense weight of a nation at war. It comes from Abraham Lincoln. The year was 1865, the American Civil War, a conflict that had torn the nation apart and cost over 600,000 lives, was finally drawing to a close. President Lincoln, weary and burdened by 4 years of unimaginable bloodshed, was looking towards a future of peace and reconstruction. But a profound sense of melancholy, a darkness he called his old companion, seemed to cling to him. Just a few days before his death, Lincoln recounted a disturbing dream he'd had to a small group that included his wife, Mary, and his close friend and bodyguard, Ward Hill Lamon. His telling of the dream has been preserved in Lamon's own writings. Lincoln began by saying that he had been in a deep sleep when he was awoken by the sound of quiet, mournful sobbing. In his dream, he got out of bed and began to wander through the silent, empty rooms of the White House, searching for the source of the grief. He went from room to room, but found no one, though the sound of heartbreaking weeping grew louder and more desperate. He followed the sound to the East Room, a grand chamber used for receptions and ceremonies. There, he saw a sight that chilled him to the bone. In the center of the room was a catafalque, a raised platform used to support a coffin during a funeral. On it rested a corpse, wrapped in funeral vestments. A crowd of people were gathered around it, staring at the body and weeping pitifully. Soldiers stood guard at the coffin. In his dream, Lincoln approached one of the soldiers. "Who is dead in the White House?" he asked. The soldier looked at him, his face filled with sorrow, and replied, "The president. He was killed by an assassin." Lincoln then said that a loud burst of grief from the crowd awoke him from the dream. But he could not shake the feeling of it. The vision was so vivid, so real, that it haunted his waking hours. He told his wife and friends about it, not as a passing fancy, but as a premonition that weighed heavily on his soul. On April 14th, 1865, just days after recounting his dream, President Lincoln was preparing for an evening out at Ford's Theater. Ward Hill Lamon, who was deeply unsettled by the dream, begged Lincoln not to go that night, but the president, not wanting to disappoint the public, insisted. That night, as he sat watching the play, John Wilkes Booth entered the presidential box, aimed a single-shot derringer at the back of the president's head, and fired. Abraham Lincoln was carried across the street to the Peterson House, where he died the next morning. His body was later brought back to the White House and laid in state for a public funeral. In the East Room, on a catafalque, guarded by soldiers, surrounded by a weeping crowd. The dream had not been a warning. There was nothing he could have done to avoid it. It was a preview, a horrifying, detailed, and accurate glimpse into the final tragic chapter of his life, delivered to him by his own subconscious just before the curtain fell.
Where are you going now? The second story awaits.
Sometimes a premonition is not a complex dream, but a simple, chilling statement from the mouth of a child. Our second story takes us to the small Welsh mining village of Aberfan on October 20th, 1966. It is one of the most heartbreaking and well-documented cases of mass premonition in history. Aberfan was a village that lived in the shadow of the local coal industry. For decades, tons of mining waste had been piled into massive tips on the mountainside overlooking the town. One of these tips, tip number 7, was precariously situated directly above the Pantglas Junior School. Our subject is a 10-year-old schoolgirl named Errol Mai Jones. She was described by her family as a bright, happy, and imaginative child. On the morning of October 20th, 2 weeks before a catastrophic disaster, Errol told her mother about a strange dream she'd had. Her words, as later recalled by her mother, were simple and haunting. She said, "Mummy, I dreamt I went to school and there was no school there. Something black had come down all over it." Her mother, like any parent, didn't think much of it. It was just a child's bad dream. But Errol was insistent, clearly disturbed by the vision. The morning of October 21st, 1966, was foggy and wet. Errol was getting ready for school. Just before she left the house, she turned to her mother and said something that would haunt her mother for the rest of her life. She looked at her calmly and said, "Mummy, I'm not afraid to die." Her mother, startled, asked her what she meant. Errol just repeated, "I will be with Peter and June," referring to 2 of her school friends. A few hours later, at 9:15 a.m., after days of heavy rain had saturated the mountain, tip number 7 catastrophically collapsed. Over 140,000 cubic yards of waterlogged coal waste slid down the mountain as a massive, unstoppable black avalanche. It moved with terrifying speed, engulfing everything in its path. It slammed directly into the Pantglas Junior School, crushing the building and burying the children inside. 144 people were killed that day. 116 of them were children, including Errol Mai Jones and her friends, Peter and June. When rescuers finally reached her classroom, they found Errol lying dead at her desk, her arms wrapped protectively around her head. She had died exactly as she had dreamt it, buried under a terrifying black mass where her school used to be. Her dream was not just a nightmare. It was a clear, specific, an accurate vision of her own death, a fate she seemed to have calmly accepted moments before walking out the door for the last time. After the disaster, a psychiatrist named J.C. Barker investigated the event and collected dozens of similar accounts of premonitions from other residents and victims. But none were as clear or as heartbreaking as that of the little girl who wasn't afraid to die.
The third story will make you question reality itself.
A presidential assassination, a national disaster. These are historic, distant events. But our final story is about something frighteningly common, something that happens every day, a car accident. It is a modern story that asks a terrifying question. If you saw your own death coming in a flash of twisted metal and shattered glass, what would you do? We'll call our subject Michael. In the winter of 2018, Michael was driving to his parents' house for a holiday dinner. It was a 2-hour drive he'd made hundreds of times, on a highway he knew like the back of his hand. He was in a good mood, listening to music, thinking about the evening ahead. He was about halfway there, driving in the fast lane, when it happened. It wasn't a thought or a daydream. It was a sudden, violent, and complete sensory takeover. For a split second, the world outside his car vanished and was replaced by a hyper-realistic vision. In the vision, he felt his hands gripping the steering wheel. He could see the specific intersection he was approaching, an off-ramp he didn't usually take. He saw a large red pickup truck running a stop sign. He felt the jolt of his car swerving, the sickening screech of the tires on wet asphalt. He saw the truck's massive grille filling his driver's side window, and he saw the spiderweb of cracks erupting across the glass. He felt a single, shocking, explosive burst of pain in his chest, and then absolute, peaceful darkness. The vision lasted no more than a second, but when he snapped back to reality, he was gasping for air, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his heart trying to beat its way out of his chest. He was still on the highway, miles from the intersection in his vision, but the experience was so real, so visceral, he had to pull over onto the shoulder, shaking uncontrollably. He sat there for 20 minutes, trying to rationalize it. A panic attack? A micro-sleep? But it was too specific. The red truck, the intersection, the feeling of the impact. He called his wife and told her what happened. She was worried, telling him to just turn around and come home. But he felt foolish. It was a holiday dinner. His whole family was waiting. He couldn't cancel everything because of a bad feeling. He made a compromise. He would keep driving, but he would deliberately avoid the off-ramp from his vision and take a longer, alternate route through a small town. He was trying to cheat fate. He got back on the road, his anxiety high. Every red truck he saw made him flinch. But as he took his new route, he began to relax. The roads were different. The scenery was new. He was in control. He had beaten the vision. He was about 10 minutes from his parents' house when he saw the flashing lights up ahead. A police officer was directing traffic. The main road was closed due to a fallen tree. The officer waved him down a side street. It was a detour. As he followed the line of cars, a cold, sickening sense of dread began to creep up his spine. he started to recognize the buildings. The detour was funneling him back towards the main road, and he realized with absolute horror that it was going to spit him out just before the exact intersection from his vision. He was trapped. The flow of traffic made it impossible to turn around. He was being carried by an invisible current towards the place he had tried so desperately to avoid. He approached the intersection. The light was green. He looked to his left, down the off-ramp, and there it was, a large red pickup truck, waiting at the stop sign, its turn signal blinking. In that final moment, Michael knew. He knew the truck was going to go. He knew there was nothing he could do. He had a few seconds of perfect, terrifying clarity. The knowledge of not only that he was about to die, but exactly how. His premonition wasn't a warning he could act on. It was simply a courtesy, a notification from the universe that his time was up. The truck pulled out into the intersection.
Now, tell me yours.
A dream of a funeral that becomes reality. A child's innocent premonition of a disaster. A driver's waking vision of his final moments. 3 stories, separated by time and circumstance, all sharing one terrifying, inexplicable thread. The human mind, somehow catching a glimpse of its own final chapter. These accounts don't offer comfort. They offer a profound and disturbing question. Is our fate a fixed point on a map? An appointment we can't cancel, no matter which road we take? Or are these just the universe's most tragic and cruel coincidences? We may never know. Do you believe it's possible for someone to see their own death? Have you ever had a premonition that came true? We invite you to share your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. And if you find these explorations into life's deepest mysteries compelling, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into true, unsettling stories. Thank you for listening.